This afternoon we have a topic that was not yet discussed too much at ARE so far. My name is Nicholas. I'm member of the board of the Alliance in Rural Electrification, and today I have the honor and being invited to talk to you all and to get e-mobility on the screen. Yeah? We have the pleasure to have here 5 experts from the sector, and as a small introduction, I wanted to mention that ARE is directing itself and opening itself to e-mobility, because we are doing since long time advocating for rural electrification. So we work for mini-grids, solar home systems. What we are seeing today that it is more and more connected also to power supply for electrical mobility. Yeah? Myself, I live in a village. I'm driving an e-car. I have an electrical bicycle. I have an electrical scooter. The village is 1,500 inhabitants, and I'm living completely CO2 neutral. Yeah? With our company there, and there, from there, we electrify villages. And I'm asking myself, what is missing that this happens in Africa as well? It's a long time that we're investing now and finding solutions. And today we want to hear and to learn why Uganda is one of the key players in that sector in East Africa. What are the good examples? What can be improved? What needs to be done to develop the sector? And we want to learn, And therefore I have here a lovely audience, and I would like to ask you some questions, and I sit down to you, next to you, and ask, what can we learn from you? And the first one to address my questions is Shanta. Shanta, maybe you introduce yourself and your company Mobility for Africa, and then we can see what we can learn from you, because you provide already last mile green mobility.
Hi everyone, my name is Shanta Blumen. As said, I run a company in Zimbabwe, and we have been on a journey to solve the last mile mobility crisis. And when I started, I knew nothing about energy. I just knew that the electric revolution in transport was happening. I had been in China for 3 years, and I decided, why not solve the problem of the rural woman being loaded with a baby and a huge basket on her head. And I think, just to pause, that we've normalised that. We've normalised that African women are superheroes, and we somehow think that that's okay. And I sit here and think about productive use, and let me tell you, mobility is the most productive use if you speak to my rural women. Because spending 5 hours in drudgery every day, going to fetch water or get your tomatoes to the market or take your kids to the clinic, is a huge loss of economic opportunity for that person. So we've been on a journey to essentially prove that we can bring electric transport to the distant rural village. And we didn't know how complicated it would be, so I admit it's not easy. We've been installing battery swapping mini-grid charging stations. They're dual charged on grid and off-grid. And we work with the tricycle that we've took off the shelf, and we've spent a long time investing in battery technology to make it fit for purpose. So we now have about 300 tricycles in Zimbabwe, and we have a formula that we believe can be replicated and scaled. And just to say that it is financially viable, because essentially you have women who, I think just going back to the transport issue in the continent, we have a deficit of transport. Ignore Kampala and the motorbikes and the second-hand vehicles, but across the continent, we have an estimated 44 vehicles per 1,000 people, and that is much, much worse the further rural you go. So just to say, quick introduction.
Very interesting, but I'm asking myself, how do you see the integration of distributed renewable energies, DRE, in that sector? How do you make it financially viable? Do you use solar energy, or how do you How do you power your engines?
So we've got charging stations that are a mix of solar and grid. We're moving to purely solar because in Southern Africa we've seen tariffs double in price for energy, because it has to, because obviously we have a huge energy deficit in Southern Africa, and we've subsidised electricity for a long time, so solar is actually a better investment. And we do battery swapping. We're not selling kilowatt hours, we're selling 100 kilometres of mobility. And when you compare that to an ICE product, it's cheaper.
That's what I expected, yeah, because I'm driving also solar with solar energy, and I'm saving a lot of money per month, $100 in Germany, yeah. But we have a political framework, yeah, which allows me to do so, yeah. But what policy frameworks are needed for you? Are there innovative financing mechanisms? What is needed for you to accelerate the adoption of e-mobility in your particular case?
I think it's across the board. It's in the mini-grid sector as well. I mean, if you're going to make a transition to the green economy, you need CapEx, heavy investment. It's not an app. It's something that requires real infrastructure. And so just like investing in rural electricity mini-grids, e-mobility requires investment. We've built a factory where we do local assembly. We do local assembly of the tricycle as well as the battery. We're building the green skills. This is a transition that's going to require multitudes of investment from government side, from private sector, from development partners. So I think we don't have a choice. I'm a little bit irritated when we look in the middle of a climate crisis that we consider, you know, just as the business model work before it's even built. I think we have to be realise that we have no choice if we want to address and mitigate the worst of the climate crisis, especially when it happens in rural areas and people are experiencing more severe weather conditions. That's not the right answer, but it is. And if we can get asset financing, we can scale.
Fantastic. Yeah? Thank you very much for this impression from Zimbabwe. Yeah? And I can only encourage everybody to check out what you're doing and to join your way. Yeah? But today we're here in Uganda, and I wanted to ask somebody from Uganda as well, yeah? Because we saw that Uganda is a fast mover in the e-mobility sector. Yeah? We had impressive companies that are grown here, and here I'm with Isaac. Help me, Tumuslim? Yeah, Tumusime, difficult to pronounce for me as a German, yeah? From the Energy Efficiency Association of Uganda, a private entity. Yeah? And I'm asking, what are the key lessons learned from Uganda? How do you integrate renewable energies and solutions with this growing e-mobility sector? Is it a chance for us from the Alliance Rural Electrification to work on?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Isaac Ephraim Tumusime, and as I've already been introduced, I'm the president of the Energy Efficiency Association of Uganda. Just like you've said, the EV, though it's a nascent area here in Uganda, it's really fast moving. And I think the biggest lesson for us as the members of the association observing it is the fact that the government and the private sector have created a very unique working partnership that is seeking to ensure that Uganda is a net exporter of EV products. And one of the things that they have done is support companies like Zembo, CPRO, and the other players in the sector to see how to push them towards accelerating the EV market in Uganda, because Uganda has 90% renewable generation, and that's a very unique opportunity. Coupled with our young population, there is something that needs to be tapped into as a country. But also, as the previous speakers in one of the sessions said, that there is no need for us to reinvent the wheel. If something is working somewhere else, as we had an interesting conversation, and we're talking about the telecom sector, and I have experience there. We had both a quantitative and a qualitative leap. We went from situations in the rural communities where there were no ways of communicating straight to mobile devices. And so as a country, we have a unique opportunity to actually take that both qualitative and quantitative leap, to take the best of the best technologies and adopt them. And what is happening with Zembo, what is happening with the players in the sector, starting with the two-wheeler space, is they are actually taking the best technologies and saying, how do we localize these technologies to our situation in Uganda and bring them to the masses? And I like what she said about the rural communities, because as somebody who has worked with mini-grids, one of the challenges they have is the lack of anchor loads. And EVs have a unique potential, and there was a study that was done by one of the companies or organizations that's actually here, RMI in Nigeria, where they were able to demonstrate that coupling mini-grids with electric vehicles, especially the two-wheelers, has potential to make better business sense for mini-grids. And because one of the challenges of mini-grids is having that low energy consumption, because they're in the rural communities, the ability for these individuals to pay for the electricity is a challenge. So why not give them the ability to do that? Coupling EVs with the mini-grids, giving them the capacity to business, creating business models around that enable them to pay for the EV two-wheelers, at the same time facilitate the mini-grid developers' business and have an ecosystem where everyone is winning. And that's something that we are observing, which is really powerful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And do you base your wishes to improve this situation also on renewable energies? Or what will be the solution in power supply? Should we have a grid extension?
I would be crazy to say grid extension. Everyone in the room would laugh at me, because in a rural setting, to extend the grid is very, how can I say, is very costly, first of all, and does not make sense, because even if you were to extend the grid, you have not yet developed the demand in that area to make business sense for anybody who's extending the grid. So the quickest, and I saw this with the containerized solutions especially, being able to quickly deploy a mini-grid in a very remote community, have the connections at a rate that even, we were seeing rates that are 5 times better than grid in terms of connections, being able to develop the customers there to be able to take on the demand, such that by the time the grid reaches those customers, it makes sense, because they have been, the capacity for them to consume has been developed, and the grid can then make sense in that situation. So I believe DRE is an EV combined a very, very important solution. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I share your thoughts, because as you know, we supplied many mini-grids and we're preparing for this, but there are also other options, yeah, as I mentioned, and maybe James, you from Zembo went a different way for the beginning, yeah? And maybe you share a little bit what you did so far. Who is Zembo? Yeah? What is your experience in Uganda? And you're known for providing electricity for electric motorbikes, yeah? And I would really know what challenges you faced, yeah, in the development, because as far as I know, you're not yet so deep in the rural area. Yeah?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you everyone who's actually in this room at 5 p.m. You're very courageous. I've been working since 8, so I sympathy. I hope you all got some coffee, and I do want to hear questions because you made the effort to be here, so I want to be able to hopefully answer some of those and give you back some value for your time. James Zaborowski, I'm CEO of Zembo Electric Motorcycles, so Uganda-based electric motorcycle company, basic model, as most of them are in East Africa. We sell a bike without a battery and then offer a battery swapping service. So it's energy as a service to our end customer. So then we own the batteries and the battery charging infrastructure and absorb that in very large investment and cost. Thank you to the panelists. A lot of interesting things. I was sitting here thinking about some ideas, talking with my co-founder about what it looks like to bring e-mobility to rural areas. Right now in East Africa, almost all of the e-mobility players have focused on urban areas because, frankly, the economics are much better. We have to invest millions of dollars in charging infrastructure. Investing that in Kampala, where I have 300,000 professional taxi drivers, makes the likelihood of getting a return on my investment quickly much better. If I go into rural areas, you have a couple of challenges. First is just the density of clients that I referred to. The second is that those clients have much lower income. They drive fewer kilometers, they earn less money generally per user, right? So this is, I think, the challenge, and what we've thought about in these areas, first of all, is what is the economic model? Because in Kampala, an electric bike from Zembo costs 30 to 40% less to operate and own, including the purchase cost, everything, than a fuel bike. So it's a no-brainer. Like, we are already in the point where it is a superior option for anyone, fuel or electric, whether you care about emissions or not. It is just a better tool for the job. So that's very exciting, first of all. I am shocked that there is not a bigger outflow of investment into our sector, given that fact, because it's already successful model, the unit economics work. But when we go to the rural area, so what is the model? There's two things. I do think that the energy price has to be a little bit higher because we have to pay for the battery. And if the use rates are lower, then you have to charge a bit more for that. So, or maybe we have to rethink how we do the model with the bike and the battery. Because currently those users buy used bikes. Very rare to see a brand new motorcycle in a rural town in Uganda. They buy secondhand because, again, their revenue is lower. I saw the time, no worries. The second thing is then getting into the really smaller areas. I think building the infrastructure. So to give you an idea, a scaled site for us with 50 to 100 chargers, so you can charge that many batteries at one time, cycle them 3 or 4 times a day. The electrical infrastructure costs about $10,000. So that's a big investment to make in a village where guys are swapping once every other day and coming in and out here and there. So I think to make that work, I mean, we've thought about a few ideas, but one is to do grid extension. So you have a larger hub kind of on the grid, and then it's pretty easy to take a 3-wheeler and put an automatic swapping cabinet on the back and fill it with batteries in the morning, send it out to the village for the day and let it run for the day and bring it back at night. So then you optimize your infrastructure investment. Because this is really the barrier for the whole sector, is how do you raise the millions of dollars to build all that infrastructure and then make sure that it has a return in a reasonable amount of time in an environment where most investors are investing in software and they want to put in $1 and get 100 back in 6 months, right? And this is not probably the model for what we are doing. And climate change innovation is always going to end up being about hardware. So you can't solve that with an app. And I think somehow we have to find a way to meet in the middle with our investor friends and make this scalable.
Shanta would like to answer you directly. Yeah?
I'm just going to say, look, just what we do, and we do have a financially viable model. We work with rural agriculture. We work with agro-business. Now, 80% of the food in this continent is grown by small-scale farmers, many of them contract farmers. Now, the other thing is Zenbo and two-wheelers work in very large cities like Nairobi or Kampala. But this continent doesn't have mega cities, it has small cities. And I'm from Southern Africa, so if you cross over from Zambia, you won't see two-wheelers. Just to say it shouldn't be an either or, but we're following the value chain. I work with dairy farmers. 1 litre of milk is 50 cents. If I can only carry 20 on my head and leave 20 at home, that's 20 times 5, that's real money. And if you look, I mean, where I work, we've got cotton farmers. We've got 1 million cotton farmers in Southern Africa. I won't talk about tobacco because we know that's bad. Sorghum, millet. Where does beer get made from? So we are underestimating the rural economy. And we should be thinking about agro-business, and that's our model. We follow agro-business, and we de-risk our farmers, and we do shared. And if we could have enough energy, we could be swapping batteries for power tools and mobility, because you can take your water pump to the field, and we would be swapping 10 times, and you wouldn't have any problem with making your mini-grid operable. So just to, sorry.
So yeah, no, hand it back to James, because maybe he has an answer, because he could say what kind of different finance mechanisms would be needed to make you move to rural areas, yeah? Do we need public-private partnerships? Do we need microfinance? This could be an idea to accelerate the growth in Sub-Saharan Africa for e-mobility in rural areas as well. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the model is always, for any mobility, partnering with businesses, right? Because they have a productive use of that asset. I do think that there's space either through government, which is very frequently, investing in rural areas, and building up electrical infrastructure, as well as maybe some larger agribusinesses or others that act as hubs who can help support the infrastructure. So for example, if you have an agro-processing center in a rural area that already has a 3-phase electrical connection for their factory, then I can just plug into that, right? Like that's very interesting. So I do think that there are models, and it also varies by country. This is a very big continent with a lot of diversity, and the rural economy, and I think the economics in each country are different. And I wouldn't presume to say what works in Uganda is exactly the model. I probably think it wouldn't be exactly the model that would work in Zimbabwe.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we give the word maybe to Maud, because she works as a senior investment officer for Electrify. She has lots of experience in investing in e-mobility in Africa, and Electrify plays a crucial role in providing financing for startups, companies in the energy access area as well as e-mobility. And how did you support the integration of renewables in that field, and what can you say? What can you address to us? How can we improve to make a financial model maybe viable?
Yeah? So maybe before answering your question, a brief summary of who is Electrify, what we are doing, and how we reached a point where we started investing in e-mobility. So we are an investment manager funded by the EU. We are an emanation of the European DFIs. We started in 2016 already. Today we have more than 70 investments in the DRE access, starting like all the usual investors with solar home systems, moving to mini grids, and then seeing the sector evolve, we've seen the importance of productive use, and it was particularly important also for the sustainability and the financial viability of mini grids, where you can't just expect that by installing a mini grid and then connecting people that they are going to buy electricity. So productive use is really a key element. Now it's integrated in the mini grid space, but it's also developing now as an independent part, and we see Uganda as a great laboratory for this on the e-mobility side. We've been also investing in cold chain, clean cooking, so these are really the extension of our mandate for not only energy access, but decarbonation, bringing renewable energy to all the different parts where it can have an impact. We are an impact investor, so we really need to see each dollar that we invest creating jobs, creating better life conditions for the end beneficiaries. And the e-mobility, although it's not a pure energy connection, but financing the expansion and the scaling of those new business models is enabling us to create jobs. The Boda drivers, they get big savings from moving from an ICE motorcycle to an e-motorcycle. So we've seen this in the unit economics. So from an impact point of view, it's a very important investment to support jobs, to support clean energy, and to support also removing pollution from those cities. We've been looking at e-mobility, and it's been moving very fast. 4 years ago, it was really an infant stage. It was an experimental, and we've seen companies here in Uganda, like Zembo, like the other operators, like GoGo Electric, Spyro, developing this business. There was a lot of questions, and also as an investor, we have to convince our investment committee to invest, and lots of questions on the technology. Everybody is looking at e-mobility at first as a charging model, so the development of the battery swapping model and the battery swapping network was a key changer in making this possible. Now, it's also a sector which is highly capital intensive. And the BODA drivers, as you mentioned, they don't have the money. They either buy used motorcycle or they need to find asset financing. So having those asset financiers also on board and having partnership with those asset financiers is making it possible to put those motorcycles on the road. But because it's not only making and assembling those motorcycles, assembling those batteries and putting the batteries in the swapping networks, you also need to have the drivers being able to buy those motorcycles and to have to work with them. So both having capital, patient capital to help the companies, the assemblers and the operators of the swapping network be able to finance those big volumes of batteries, and also having asset financier being there to support the end beneficiary, to support the BODA driver with a loan, a lease-to-own mechanism, enabling the BODA driver to own his motorcycle maybe after 1.5, 2 years is also a key factor to scale this sector.
So this would be your part of the financing model that you recommend in that case, and the question is what is the challenge to implement it? Why is it still not, well, you said it's moving fast, it's true, but what is missing to make it explode?
I think as in all different business models in the DRE sector and more generally, there is a lack of equity. So there really needs to be equity investment, patient capital, strategic capital, investors being there to support the companies through the different size. And we see this, our average ticket size is around 3 million, but we always keep some dry powder to do some follow-on investment. We see a lot of investors in the sector who do a first ticket and then are not there for the next stage. And this leads to dilution, this leads to very big cap tables, but with investors and shareholders who are not able to support the company in its journey to profitability. So this is one important factor. We've seen also some models some asset financing models, so splitting, like for mini grids, so splitting the battery ownership in asset cos, which enables also to attract different types of investors with different risk profile. But again, we see this model has advantages, but it also has the disadvantage that by creating different risk profile, there is a sort of sheep behavior that all investors are going for the least risky investment. And then at that moment, you end up with no money or no capital being available for the more risky part, which is the development and the operating companies. So equity, asset financing, and being able to couple both is really key for scaling this sector.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very interesting for me also to learn, as I'm new in the e-vehicle sector, let's say, coming from the mini-grid. But I saw that here in Uganda, you succeeded already a lot. Maybe this is also because Uganda is pushing this sector. And we have here on the stage today Simon Kalenzi, do I pronounce it right? Yeah, he's Commissioner of the Energy Efficiency Department of the Ministry of Energy here in Uganda. And you've seen so many e-mobility coming to Uganda. There must be a reason, yeah? And we have startups, we have bigger companies now, as you said, yeah? What role do private-public partnerships, PPPs, private-public partnerships play here? How do you scale, and what are you doing to scale these sustainable transport solutions here in Uganda? That would be really interesting because we are facing, as we heard, high upfront costs. What can we do? What are you doing as a government to encourage this?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I'd like to take note that as a government, we would like to develop an e-mobility sector that is market-based. Because when it is based on subsidies, then it cannot last, or it can't develop. That's the first approach we have. Then what do we need from public-private partnership? The first thing is what they have already said. We need to mobilize capital and expertise. And we base on people like Zembo through their experiences, and we develop policies or a regulatory framework that can make them market-based. Because he can testify to you, he doesn't need to come to the Ministry of Energy to be in a position to sell his bike. But he looks at the market, he competes with the market favorably. And he can also tell you that anybody else is converting from a normal fossil fuel bike to an electric bike without coming to government. So what we need is a private person to be in a position to mobilize his capital, and he has the expertise to be in a position to have those electric bikes on the market. Then the other thing, what do we need from another private person? Sharing risks. Because it's important to share risks for the market to be there. What risks do we share? Government takes the handles, the regulatory, and the operational risks from that perspective to ensure that Zembo and others could operate. Then the private sector takes the risk of marketing. It's a risk they take. They gamble within a market of transport to ensure that they are in position to compete. So that's the risk they take, hoping that the returns will come, they can develop, people can pick up the bikes. So that's the approach we want to maintain. Then the other one, of course, is accelerating the infrastructure, especially the charging infrastructure across board. And in that aspect, I already explained the levels of capital it requires to be in a position to have charging infrastructure across. In the town, it's easier for us where there is electricity, but again, where there is no electricity, we're again encouraging the renewable energy technologies to take root. And it's one of those that we have within, and we're intentional in our national electric strategy that off-grid systems are a way to go, especially those areas which are far away from the grid and the fast developing areas. Another thing is, which we try to put in place, is fostering innovation and local content. It's quite important for us that when Zembo is here, he passes on the knowledge, and the knowledge is adopted. And we look at e-mobility as an area for job creation for a lot of our youth in the country. Then another aspect which we are looking at, which is quite important, especially from renewable energy sense and the off-grid systems, is the aspect of productive use. And e-mobility provides that as well. So if you have an off-grid system in a rural area and they are using it for charging, that means we have productive use in that area and it is developing. So it's an addition, productive use, and mini grids now become more viable in rural areas. So those are the areas we are trying to emphasize on, and we're ensuring also have the exact law they require. We also handle the aspect of standards. Like that if one picks up Zembo's bike, it can be in a position to provide the distance for the charge it's talking of. So it's quite important that we do that. So, and we're intentional through our energy policy 2023, and also we are highly intentional on the standards that are required for e-mobility in our energy efficiency and conservation bill, which is for Parliament, and we are ensure that all these things are followed, and the licensing will come into play. And also there's a cry, as I said, learn from the expertise on the ground that is coming in through the charging tariff for them to be viable, and to give them electricity that is viable and of that particular standard. So that is something also working on to make the market viable.
Yeah, for us it's interesting to learn what is your future plan for the next 5 years maybe, because if you want to set these standards and you need a political framework, yeah? Let's say policy interventions and a regulation framework, I wanted to say, yeah? Do you have something in mind, or you have already plans to do so?
Yes, we already have plans to ensure that our energy efficiency and conservation bill becomes law, whereby we have the charging tariffs brought into play. We have standards brought into play, such that you don't allow to have fake batteries on the market or fake bikes on the market. We ensure that the issues of emissions are also taken on through the bill, because all of us know there is an advantage that e-mobility provides in reduction of emissions. So the law is also coming in to curb that, And we look forward to erasing fossil, for example, bikes, which are highly used in rural areas and urban areas, and also very intentional in our national electric strategy whereby we should be having bikes that use fossil fuels in the next, by 2030 or through to 2040. So these are intentional policy direction or regulatory frameworks that are in place to ensure that the country moves green in the future.
Good, thank you. And do you also have a framework for the rural areas in mind? How to encourage that we overpass what James was saying to come to the rural areas? Do you encourage mini-grids, for example, to use e-mobility, or is there a program on the way, or is it just a dream of myself?
No, it's not a dream. We already have, we have developed mini-grids in the country, and one of, as I said earlier, one of the policy directions of government is to ensure productive use from the energy that's provided. And we already have examples. We have the Lamo mini grid, which has already been installed, and we're working very hard to ensure that productive use comes into play. And electrical mobility is one of those areas that we are intentionally promoting to ensure that Zembo could be in a position to go to Lamo, and that they need to spend now on a charging infrastructure because the electricity is there for a mini grid. It makes it easier for him to go and invest in that upcoming town. Yes, we are intentional on productive use through renewable energy systems, and also we ensure that we tap those benefits that will make Uganda a green economy for the future.
Thank you. So we had a round of all of 5 of you, very interesting impressions. The question is now, how do we set it in place? Yeah. My main question is always, how do we attract finance? Yeah. We talked about finance models. We talked about scaling the impact, and how can we attract more private capital to this, or is it governmental capital that is needed? Where should it come from? Do you have ideas? The question is to all of you and also to the audience. Yeah, you're free to ask now, and because we want to boost the e-mobility sector. Yeah, we are here willing. We have solutions we have political willingness. Yeah. What is missing? I'm asking myself, what is missing? Chantal.
I think what we need is, I think this has been echoed, I've been 2 weeks in mini-grid conversations, is we need more patient long-term capital, first of all. So we've got to stop thinking we can get a 20% IRR within 5 years. We've got to say we need to be more realistic. Africa already has the highest cost of financing. So we've also got to be honest. Why is 12% concessional financing? It's not. It sounds it in Africa, but in the rest of the world, people look at you and go, my God, So I think we have to be honest. If we want to move forward and meet the SDG goals and meet the Mission 300 target, we need to start saying, honestly, let's really lower our expectations of rate of returns. Let's offer less concessional finance and let's scale. Because what we're doing at the moment is we're putting too much pressure on developers and we're setting them up for failure. Because to grow from 300 tricycles, which I have now, to 5,000, I'm going to need access to cheaper financing. And where am I going to find that? We can find local financing for our customers. We've just done a deal in Zimbabwe with a bank that will offer what Incopa offers in Kenya, that they will finance the informal sector with financing for the tricycle for a lease to purchase. But I've still got to unlock the investment for the mini-grid and the batteries. So I just, at the moment, am very concerned that we're not making finance more flexible and more patient and more realistic. And unfortunately, I don't have the decision-making power to change that. But I think as people that work in this continent and as Africans, we have to demand it.
We are here to address these topics, and I would pass the microphone to Maud.
Yes, thank you. I'm not going to discuss whether 20 or 12% is a good IRR, but I think that as for every investment, the first factor for the investors is risk, is managing risk or having a risk level that is understood, that is manageable and acceptable. And for this, and I think that are very positive moves in Uganda and in some other geographies, is having a conducive regulatory context, is making sure that you don't have changes in tax rates from one week to the other, that customs are not changing, and that there are no, I would say, counterproductive decision being made. Having a strategy, a very ambitious strategy, when you think about having only electric bikes on the road in Uganda in 2030, that's a very ambitious strategy, and it is feasible from the moment that investors are able to look towards this deadline of 2030 and knowing that the investment environment will be stable and that they can count also on a positive, a conducive situation. Having also, for instance, like for all other investment, we're talking about asset financing, having the possibility for debt lenders to put securities in place in an easy way. And I'm talking maybe about very small details, but when you're taking a security for a debt and you have to have wet ink signing at the time of DocuSign and digitalization, it's so all these little aspects that are valid for any investment are also valid for the e-mobility sector. The second element, I would say, is the mix, and we discussed rural versus urban. I think both are of course important. The urban sector was obviously the easiest because then you have the scale in one place. It's also where we've seen the operators starting. I think the next wave, if we want to go to the rural areas, it has to be also innovation in terms of business models and having working with farmers, having this nexus between energy and agriculture, making sure that we go to the next stage of productive use, not only passenger transport, but having aggregation of agriculture products, creating those innovative business models that can be scaled is also the next step, I think, to get investors to come and join the pack to support the sector.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience.
Thank you all. My name is Roland. I'm from NIFIO. We're a debt investor in this space. Hi, James. Nice to meet you again. Big question here is how do we ensure collaboration within this space? Because especially talking about infrastructure and infrastructure investments, if Ampersand and Zembo and Rome all are building their own battery swap stations, all are building their own infrastructure, they are duplicating a lot. And I mean, if I buy a BMW, I'm not limited to only tank at Shell, right? So how do we make sure collaboration brings efficiency in the sector? Thanks.
Yeah, who wants to answer? James, go on.
I get this question all the time, so I think I'm very happy to answer.
This is my question, by the way, from the next round, yeah?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two things to understand. We shouldn't mix things. Plug-in charging, the battery is owned by, and the charger actually built into the vehicle, are owned by the vehicle owner, right? They're one unit. And I think universal charging is desirable there, right? Where you should have either a single connector or at least adapters so that every vehicle can use every charger. The model we see evolving in light electric vehicles is in two-wheelers and three-wheelers, is where the operator owns the battery. So we have to protect that multi-million-dollar investment, and we can't just give it away for anyone to charge it, because then how am I going to collect revenue to pay for the battery, very expensive battery that I purchased? So when we look east to more mature markets, I mean, India is really taking off now, but even in Southeast Asia and China, which is very far ahead, what we see is some grouped alliances. And this is something that Zembo has been pushing for some time. Unfortunately, our counterparties are not ready yet, but we are ready to share. And that sharing takes a few different levels. I do see now some innovators in Kenya who are offering the electrical infrastructure as a service. So you come and lease and plunk down your charging cabinet and plug it in. That's already, for me, as I mentioned earlier, a huge savings and much more interesting, so I don't have to make that investment that's fixed. So I think you can separate that already from the battery swapping. And we would be very keen to work with anyone doing that. So far, there's no one in Uganda, but we would do it in a heartbeat. The next level is getting multiple motorcycle manufacturers to use the swapping infrastructure. I think the challenge we have right now is no one's stupid. We all know the money is in the batteries. And so we're all fighting to be the dominant player in that. But this will eventually shuffle out. We're still in early adopter phase. Way less than 10% of the market for overall market for, let's say, bikes, two-wheelers, fuel and electric. So once we cross out of that, 10% is usually the line. When you start to become mainstream, I think we'll see more consolidation. But as it's still very early days, we're still competing on who has the best model. And by the way, there won't be one winner to this. If anyone thinks that, they're deluding themselves. Already, just technologically, there are some trade-offs that you have to make. You get a bit better range, but then higher costs per swap, etc. Different battery sizes have pros and cons. There's at least 3 to 4 different models that I think will coexist, that will find different market segments. And you have to choose one, and once you've chosen it, you can't choose the other. So I definitely see in any large market 3 to 4 ecosystems evolving, and the market is more than large enough to make all 4 profitable.
Can I just add on the battery front? I mean, you know, the challenge with e-mobility in rural is it needs its own research in R&D in the batteries. So if you buy off the shelf from China or India, it will blow up if you're going 8 hours on a bumpy road. And I can verify that because I've gone through 5 years of R&D. So we've developed our own bespoke battery, which is integrated with our tricycle and with our charging system, so it serves as dual purpose. That's a huge investment in testing, making product fit for rural Africa, which I also think we underestimate. You know, everyone wants to just import stuff at the moment. So we've developed our own BMS, we assemble, we're building the skills to manage and maintain that asset. I'd happily supply any 3-wheeler company that wants to come to us and expand. Do you know what I mean? But it takes an ecosystem. You can't just dump this stuff in rural areas, otherwise it will last a month or 2 and then it won't work. So I think that's the part of the challenge at the moment. It's different in rural because no one is doing the R&D that we need to deal with our rural roads.
Anyone else? So I think we can dream of making, you learned me the word in English because I didn't know, technology leap. Yeah? We come in rural energy from a phase or from telecoms where we had no landlines in rural areas. Yeah? And then mobile phone came and changed communication. Yeah? So what we're dreaming today is that we have no electrical, no motorbikes or no, let's say, mobility in rural areas. And e-mobility can be a game changer and make a technology leap. Yeah? So I think we thank you all for getting these impressions to live this dream, because I think you're available. I don't know if somebody wants to add a closing word. And maybe, you look like you want to talk. No. But maybe, Simon.
Okay, thank you very much. You are looking for a closing word. Now, from the ministry perspective, I'm happy with the question in there. I'm happy with the argument. It shows me that e-mobility has a future in Uganda. Maybe to highlight my opinion in regard to financing, the question you asked earlier. I believe one of the key bottlenecks to open the financing is awareness. Because awareness is both ways, is both from the gentleman who wants to, or any other person who wants to invest in e-mobility. He would like to know, first of all, where can I take my proposal to be funded? That means looking at a bank. And the bank is looking at also doesn't have any clue whether e-mobility has any future anywhere. For example, like in Uganda. So we need to do awareness on both sides, the one who want to invest and the banking person. Then the second aspect we need to look at, we have to learn from those who have started this nascent industry in Uganda, like Zembo, Spiro, Chira Motors. What are those aspects that they think can unlock financing in a given bank? So then we go to that bank and we, as government, we table those ideas. Then you listen to Zombo, Chira Motors, Nissan, what is making it so expensive, for example, to own an electric vehicle in Uganda. Somebody tells you, possibly doing business in Uganda is expensive. So what makes it expensive? What kind of tariffs, what kind of incentives that can unlock this sector and remains market-based? I think those are the issues we need to look at, such that we can unlock financing. At least the players who are in the country today have showed us they can do it. Because one of the issues was, which is getting unlocked, upfront financing, for example, for an electric bike. But now most companies have started the hire purchase system, which was already running for the fossil ones. So they also brought it into the electric bikes. So this is unlocking more bikes coming into the market. We're seeing numbers going to now thousands each month because of the hire purchase system. So looking at innovative ways of making it easier for someone to be in a position to own an electric mobility item, that is quite key. Then for the bank person who is going to give you money, you'd like to know how secure. For example, if I give out my bike on hire purchase, will it run out 2 years for me to recover my money and Zembo recover this money and the bank just put in the money? Security of any nation is key. So those are and also the political environment. How is it? Then the environmentalists, all the NGOs, have you catered for them? Are they on your side? Are you doing what's positive? For example, are you encouraging a particular group, like the example I've had from Zimbabwe, particular group? Let's say if women are taking their husbands home, can we change this bike to electric? So all those are initiatives that can unlock financing and many more. So government is going to look at that, ultimately creating a better policy and regulatory framework for e-mobility in the country. So the future is good.
This would be a fantastic last word, that women empowerment leads us to a new era of e-mobility, but we still have one question from the audience, and if there's a question, we should hand it over before really end and go over to the cocktail. But thanks for this word. You have a microphone? Yes. Yeah,
thank you. First of all, thanks for a well-moderated debate and some good insights shared. Thanks for that. My name is Magnus Nielsen. I work for the Danish DFI. We invest primarily equity in different energy-related business models, also represented by one of our portfolio companies, Nethio, right here. Among the business models we invest in is also mini-grids and EVs. So I wanted to ask about your experience between discussions from mini-grid owners or metro-grid owners and more rural connection of e-mobility.
We have no mini-grid owners on the stage at the moment, yeah?
We do both. We do both. So essentially, we're in a country where there are no mini-grid operators, and I didn't realise I was a mini-grid operator until now. I mean, till we started investing in. Our largest station is the 70 kVA solar, and we've designed our batteries to be dual purpose. And so we didn't start with connections. We started with mobility, and essentially, I think the formula. I mean, look, it's different than what's happening in Zambia or in Kenya. But in our part of the world, we started testing. So we're doing both. We'd be happy to work with mini-grid operators. We're looking at that in Zambia, as well as expanding. But I think it can be done. I think it's also a mindset between understanding, and I'm stating the obvious, but if you've spent time in rural, people move, and they need to move. Their field where they grow their tomatoes might be 3 kilometres from their house, and you know, their clinic is 10 kilometres away. So if you look at an ecosystem, what we're saying is shared transport, and think of that 30 kilometres radius as where your energy should be serving, rather than connections. Sorry, because connections are great, but the men will watch television and the woman will still get up and fetch the water in the morning. So until we change that dynamic, I think we have to really question how we service our rural communities.
Yes, I think the future will be rural infrastructure programs, which means electricity, mobility, water, education, everything combined, and that will be the model for the future, in my opinion. Yeah? And I think let's dream this dream, and now dream it on at the cocktail upstairs. Yeah? I don't know where it is, but I think it's upstairs. No?
So you're all kindly invited to the cocktail, which is sponsored by Electrify and our partners of Gaia that I see there at the back of the room. And it's by the lake, so you follow the lake, you should get there. Thank you.
I worked in agriculture for years, so I'm not biased towards urban in West Africa.